Critics are accusing Washington of putting politics above human rights after the US released a scaled-back human rights report which omits details of abuses for certain countries.
Hi, everyone.
Under the Trump administration, the State Department's 2024 report softens the criticism of Trump allies like El Salvador and Israel, both accused of serious violations, while ramping up scrutiny of Brazil, South Africa and free speech in Europe. Amnesty International has accused Washington of politicising the findings, saying it even removed sections on issues such as discrimination against LGBTQ+ community for some countries. Here is how the State Department defended its new report.
The Human Rights Report has been restructured in a way that removes redundancy, increases report readability, and is responsive to the legislative mandates that underpin the report, rather than an expansive list of politically biased demands and assertions.
Scott Busby is a former State Department employee who is leading the analysis of the US government annual country reports on human rights practices at the international human rights organisation Human Rights First. Good to see you, Scott. The Trump administration is leaving a very strong mark on many facets of government. Have you ever witnessed this type of approach by a US State Department in regards to human rights reporting?
No, I haven't. There's a long history of relatively objective, neutral, comprehensive reporting on the human rights situation in every country in the world by the State Department each year, and Republican and Democratic administrations alike have generally stuck to this standard. The cuts to the reports made by the Trump administration are unprecedented. I haven't seen anything like that in my lifetime.
So why then is this administration doing this? What do they get to do as a result of taking such an apparently selective approach to calling out human rights violations?
Well, they say that they are trying to adhere to what the law requires. They want them to be more concise and readable, they say, but clearly the cuts they've made to the reports, and these cuts, by the way, are across the board, the cuts to freedom of peaceful assembly, cuts to reporting on elections, cuts to reporting on all types of discrimination, be it against women, ethnic and racial minorities, indigenous persons, persons with disabilities, LGBT persons. All of these things, I think, are being driven to some extent by a political agenda, not to scrutinize the behavior of other countries on these issues.
And it might sound like a simplistic question, but why is it so important how human rights abuses are collated and reported by the US?
Well, first of all, it's very important to have as neutral and objective a record of the human rights behavior of every government in the world for purposes of making decisions about a security assistance, foreign aid. This information is also vital to decisions on asylum and refugee protection. An asylum seeker can't establish the bona fides of their claim if there isn't information out there to support it. This type of information is critical to the people in these countries who are fighting for positive change on human rights. When the US reported on human rights violations in a neutral way across the board, activists could say, look at what the United States has said about what our government is doing. Now activists are not as strong a position to do that, given the cuts in these reports.
It sounds like a broad field to select from here, but what troubled you most in this report? What is an example of something written in or written out that will shape the way the world talks about human rights?
Well, the cuts I referred to, I think, are very significant and troubling. The idea that we would not report on freedom of peaceful assembly, a right, by the way, that is central to America's own founding. The fact that that's not being covered in any country, be it Germany or El Salvador, is very troubling to me. The fact that there's no reporting on elections. Elections, of course, are critical to holding governments accountable. And the fact that the Trump administration has decided to cut that altogether is troubling. as you mentioned earlier, too, the way in which certain reports are skewed is very disturbing. In El Salvador, for instance, as you noted, the Trump administration has concluded that there are no significant human rights issues in that country. But virtually every news organization and every human rights organization has identified significant abuses in El Salvador, from arbitrary detention to torture. And at the same time, Hungary was given a pass. At the same time as the Trump administration is calling out Germany, France, and the UK for restrictions on freedom of expression, the Trump administration concluded that there are no significant human rights issues in Hungary, which to me is shocking.
Scott Busby at the international human rights organisation Human Rights First, thanks for talking us through that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew.